Ladies and gentlemen, our next session, the first session of the day, Flouting International Law and the Failure of International Institutions. May I introduce our moderator for the session, Tan Sri Razali Ismail. He is a distinguished Malaysian diplomat. He joined the Malaysian service in 1962, former president of the UN General Assembly, former chairman of the UN Security Council, and the former UN Special Envoy to Burma. Tan Sri Razali Ismail.
Good morning, salam sejahtera, ladies and gentlemen, particularly to the people who have come to Malaysia to take part in this conference. My job is just as a moderator. I will try to put the subject in perspective, but my primary job is to introduce to all of you the three speakers this morning. May I then start with Mr. Gajendra Singh, who was part of my fraternity before in the diplomatic service and has been ardently following these subjects since leaving the diplomatic service. He comes from India, and obviously there's a lot of groundswell of consciousness about all these problems, war and peace in that country. And I would like also to introduce Ms. Cynthia McKinney, yes. Very much a campaigner of these very important issues, yes. Involved in the politics of the United States, and with us this morning and for the rest of the duration, making inputs and insights into our deliberations. And we have, of course, Mr. Galloway, George Galloway, known to all of us for his special, unique abilities, for his continuing, unflagging energy to deal with the difficult, thorny issues before us, and for being a lifetime campaigner on all these issues about war and about peace and about justice. So it is good to have three people up here that will talk to you 20 minutes each about the general subject of criminalizing war, but particularly looking at the failure of international institutions. Mr. Gajendra Singh and I, we have dealt with many in our profession. We have dealt with international institutions. There are pluses and there are minuses, but sometimes the minuses, the negative aspects of international institutions are more than you can count. But anyway, on the issue of criminalizing war, there was an attempt by Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928 when the United States and France wanted to promote a multilateral pact to deal with criminalizing war. But a bit later, the United States withdrew or didn't follow through because it wanted to keep its right for a freedom of action. And that was the end of the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928. The United Nations Charter, Article 2, Para 4, states that all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. That was not very helpful actually in preventing war from happening. In fact, every country that wanted to go to war sought recourse in the concept of self-defense, and therefore there were wars of so-called self-defense that led to no end. If you looked at the number of wars that have taken place, you can see that everybody that advocated wars almost always would do it in the context of self-defense. And there is, in the case of Israel, it is possible to see that how they have stylized their ability to go to war to such an extent that they make the argument that they are under siege by their neighbors, and therefore they have perfected the ability to conduct a conventional war in such a devastating way, and all in the name of self-defense or their assertion of clear and present danger. So the efforts of international institutions to do much more than what it has done, that record is quite dismal. At best, it has always been, international institutions have always at best done only things to prevent, to help the casualties of war after war had been perpetrated. Even in that case, the casualties of war are not done in a manner that is fair and overall, in an overall context that is clear to everybody that it has been helpful. In the time of the Cold War, we had many proxy wars, which didn't help. Actually, it's the ability to conduct these proxy wars depended on how willing the great powers were to support and provide for the means for these proxy wars to take place. In Asia at this moment, there are no wars, but there are tensions that may lead to some kind of further tension. In the context of Asia, what we are trying to do here in terms of criminalizing war, perhaps the first step should be taken to interest governments concerned in this area to take steps, however daring they can be, to criminalize war internationally. It is, to me, a figment or a delusion to say that war, there is such a thing as just war or the just conduct of war. There is no such thing. As much as even the UN, given the right to, under Article 7, to bring about the beginning of conflicts, even that should be looked at and examined again to see that the ability of the UN to do this is not hijacked by certain countries for its own purposes. We have seen this in the context of Iraq, for example. Finally, in order to criminalize war, we have to make sure that the major powers are able to accept the notion that as much as they took part to abolish slavery, something that Tun Mahathir referred to earlier, they would also be willing to take steps to criminalize war. This seems like a very long haul for all of us. But if it's possible to marshal together enough energy and a critical volume of serious protest and support towards criminalizing war, it is perhaps possible to get it done. But a particular roadmap has to be put out so that it doesn't just fizzle away in just rhetoric. So we have these three speakers today, this morning, and they will talk about the failure or the inability of international institutions to take steps to bring about the criminalization of war. I shall start by calling Mr. Galloway. Sir, you have the floor. If you want to.